adoption and strippers and Jesus and
all the good stuff, man.
Yeah.
So how did you guys get to know each other? How did you guys meet?
Probably, I want to say maybe six years, maybe.
Yeah, that sounds about right. 6-7 years.
Yeah,
Sure.
because they would come in.
The firehouse?
Yeah, and they would. I think the first thing they brought was cookies,
Oh, yeah, that's good.
right?
Yeah, and well, I don't remember the first thing we brought, but I remember Salem Ecclesia would bring stuff, and it would be like from Salem Ecclesia and your friends at Pole Gyms and Salem Ecclesia.
Yeah, and it was like we ended up. I still have the little fingernail kit.
Oh, the stripper survival kit.
Yeah, it has little. You got your toenails, your fingernail, the file, and it just sits in. I use it, so because I'll do my toes or whatever, and it sits in with my stuff. I have the flower that is a clip that it was black, white, and green, and the little centerpiece is like a tiger.
Oh yeah, Aaron did the flowers. Yeah.
Yeah. He's like, wow, yeah.
That's
It's and I used to give like my daughter, because I got a scarf and it was like thin, but it did this wrap thing, and I was like, I told my daughter's all, I go, it's not really my color, but you can, and she's like, oh yeah, and she would, some of the makeup, here you go, Sheena, you can wear that. Did not know she was gonna do what she does now, but yeah. But she's thinking and hoping that she gets this one job, that she doesn't have to do this.
But you were at Firehouse, and did you say Salem Ecclesia was there with Pole Gyms or before Pole Gyms or before you?
No, so Salem Ecclesia actually paid for Michelle and I. Michelle since moved. We were still in the master's program when Michelle Cox and David were the pastors.
Right.
Sent us to the first pilot training in Las Vegas through Strip Church.
Oh, that's right. 'Cause you went to Las Vegas training first.
Yeah, in 2011.
Okay. You and Michelle.
Yeah, a different Michelle, not Michelle Cox, a different Michelle that I was in the master's program with, and she used to be a stripper. And of course, I served cocktails in a strip club, so we're like, hey, this is fantastic. We found our people,
Right.
So they sent us to that, and they paid for it, which was really sweet.
Yeah.
And they really supported us. So in the very early days of Pole Gyms, before we really had any kind of, before things were really formalized, when we started expanding into different clubs, Salem Ecclesia actually took Firehouse and said, like, the children's group was actually making a lot of the stuff for Firehouse, yeah. And
I didn't know that history actually.
Isn't that cool?
That's
And
really cool.
it was Dee doing a lot of it.
Oh, okay.
If you can believe that, Dee Smith. Did you ever meet Dee?
I don't think I know Dee. I was thinking someone I know at the church, but someone previous.
Yeah.
Okay.
She's a very conservative, kind of right-wing person, and it was just absolutely. But it was.
But it's the love of Jesus, right? Yeah.
And that's all that
Cuts
matters.
through all that, yeah.
It does. It just cuts through all of that. And during that time, there was a gal that used to be, was in the industry, and she brought her daughter to Salem Ecclesia, and this is when we were out in West Salem.
Right.
And her daughter was like 8 or 9, and they were there. Cameron was with her because Cameron was probably 10 in the children's group, and Dee was talking about God loving everybody and how we're gonna make these things for a strip club, right? And this lady's daughter goes, "My mom's a stripper."
Yes.
And
So good.
at most churches, that would be a big deal. But this little girl's like, my mom's a stripper and blah, blah, blah. And they're like, well, and Jesus loves her. And like Cameron's like, God loves her. And so we'll make her some gifts. Like it was totally accepted, right? Like what church does that happen?
Ours, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, and since then, this lady has gotten out of the industry, got married. We actually did a whole the gatekeeper stuff that we did. We did that with her and with Penny.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember Pastor Penny?
I don't know
Did you ever meet her?
Yeah, I never did. Yeah.
Another super right-wing
Yeah.
conservative, and she would sit down and meet with Danielle, and it was just
So good.
amazing to see the freedom come in her life. And she left the industry and got married, and Yeah, it's pretty cool, but that's
so
kind
that's
of
kind of how
really.
it started. Okay, so
Yeah.
thanks for reminding me about the training. You mentioned that once before, but I actually forgot about that.
Mhm.
And then you met at Firehouse.
Yes.
And the group would come in, and you said specifically you remember the nail kit.
The nail kit.
Flowers, scarves.
Flowers, candies. There was little sayings. Also, you get like nail polish, some makeup, just things to show that there's somebody out there
You know?
that, and that was, Cynthia would come in. If it wasn't Cynthia, it was somebody else, out of the girls. But me and her touched base a lot because I didn't want, I knew that wasn't something I wanted to be doing,
Oh.
but it was something that at that time me and my husband, we were working doing floors, and we were subcontractors.
Right.
And what happened was the money disappeared because the company that we were working through just all of a sudden said, no, we're not doing this. So
The rug got pulled out from under you like that.
Just like that.
Oh, so income
And
stopped
when you're,
for both
yeah,
of you.
yeah. And so I was working also, I just got a job working for a
No,
company
it's interesting
called
you said
Main
something you
Suite.
didn't want to do. So how did you end up
And when
Yeah,
he
yeah.
lost his income, I was like, this is not going to do this. There's no way.
Right.
We have 3 kids.
Right.
This is, and I was trying to think about doing cocktail waitressing or being a waitress or something along those lines because it's fast money.
Right, and it's good money.
Yeah. And nobody would hire me because I didn't have experience. So I was like, okay, what do I do? And Clean Sweep that I was working for, the funny story behind that is that the boss that I still work for, which I still work for, he actually owned that company.
Oh, yeah.
And he owns Total Solutions Janitorial and Maintenance.
Right.
And but he used to own Clean Sweep.
Oh, you own them both, okay.
Yeah, no, Total Solutions wasn't
Wasn't that?
wasn't there yet.
Okay.
So I walked up to him
Well,
and I
let me just interrupt really quick,
Yeah,
just
I
to.
saw you react a little bit.
Yeah, well, just to
Connect some
give
dots.
you, yeah, when Dwayne and I, my husband and I first started walking back with the Lord in 2001, we met the people that own,
Total
Total
Solutions
Solutions.
and Clean
and
Sweep.
they became really good friends of ours back then, before any talk of strippers was ever a thing. And we became really close, tight friends with them. So anyway, just
That's
to,
really cool, the connections.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
just to, yeah.
Before you met Josetta, everything.
Before I
Yeah.
met Joe, all of it.
Okay.
And so I walked up to him and I was very honest because I was like, I need to quit. And he was like, why are you quitting? And I said, because you guys can't afford me. And he looked at me and I'm like, I need to make about $20 an hour. And back then, that was impossible. It wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
But because of the stuff that was laid on my plate, I had to, because I had experience. I knew what I was doing, all that. But that would almost take their job away. And there's no way. So I decided that I was going to go dance, or at least try to. So I got on the stage and I brought home about $100 that day. And
Just like
it
that.
was like, yeah, I was like, this is, It was very hard though, because I was a very shy person. So I had to come out of that bubble. And I call it, I wouldn't say blinders, but something was with me that always protected me. Because when I danced, I never really paid attention to I just listened to the music and
You kind of
danced.
checked out and danced and
Uh-huh.
did your thing, and not really connected to with the audience or the responses.
Yeah, and when I did, sometimes it wasn't very nice. you know, and that industry that's the raw of it.
Yeah, that's hard. You mentioned that to me before, actually, that the industry can really be very, very brutal to the people working in it in the past. And now, did you have any history with Jesus or the church prior to meeting, you know, do you have any background in, you know, being a Catholic or anything like that?
When I was little, there was a church that was up the street from my house. And I remember asking my mom if she would go to church with me. Well, my mom was an alcoholic, and she also was agoraphobic.
Oh, agoraphobic, where she wouldn't
Agoraphobic.
leave the house?
Yeah, for a long time. When she did, she'd have the attack. And it just depended, so she would drink, and then she could leave. And it sucked being a kid knowing that your mom's drunk to get in the car with her to go, but
There's the only way she could do it.
yeah. So she was like, no, I can't go, but you can go. So I would go to church, and then my cousin, I call them my cousins, but it was my mom's AA sponsor. They would come and ask me if I wanted to go to their church. So I got a little bit of Protestants. Yeah, it was a Protestant church that I went to. Okay, and then my cousin, I call them my cousins, but they were Mormons. And then we had a Jehovah's Witness lady that loved to come to my, so I got different religions kind of that went through, and I was just like, yeah, no, I don't know, you know, and it was, but I knew there was a God. I mean, there was times where, you know, he actually, I wouldn't say I got to see his face, but I got to see what he had worked in people's lives and stuff. So that part of the faith was always there. It was just trying to figure out how to make it more there, you know?
I'm always amazed, actually fascinated by people's childhood experiences with the Lord. You know, people that either weren't in church or were, but kind of always knew that God was present.
Mm-hmm.
My wife remembers being 4 years old and knowing that there was a God, like just in her room praying. She knew that God was real, that was it. And that was her moment. And from then on, she never doubted, never really wavered from that.
There's a lot of that, and I just think that people have, they're not used to it. They haven't heard it, so they don't know when it's there.
They don't know, right?
Yeah,
They're experiencing it, they can't articulate it.
Yeah, and I think, like, there were certain things that happened, like when I was young, like my brother passed away, and I was in 6th grade, and I remember him coming and telling me, you know, goodbye, and walking over and going. So I think, and then, you know, my mom telling me the next day that my brother passed. Okay, that wasn't my brother, that was...
You had an experience of something.
Yeah. And so that kind of opens your world up to, well, it was a good thing, you know, so these are the possibilities.
There was some preparation.
Yeah. So it was just more along the lines of, some people take it bad, some people take it good.
Right.
I took it good.
You took it good, yeah.
You know?
I like that. And so now you're dancing, you're making the money, you've had to, you have lost the income, and somewhere during that time frame, Pole Jam, State of Nicosia comes out there. And what was that like for you to be loved on by the church in that?
At first it was scary.
Yeah. How was it scary?
The scary part was, Cynthia knows a little bit about this. When I first started dancing, as I started to get the ideas to dance, there were things that were happening out in the dancer community of like the clubs or like bad things happening. But the church, there was people protesting.
Oh, like outside protesting.
Yes.
Yeah, signs.
Yeah, and some of it wasn't good.
Right.
And, you know, so it was kind of weird. It was like, well, how do you, and, you know, me being there for a long time, a lot of the girls are like, should we eat these cookies? What do we do? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I mean, you know,
That's a great question. You got people protesting outside.
Yeah, you know? And then it's like,
Jonestown.
yeah, it's like, what do you do? You know? And I'm like, well,
I never thought. I love that perspective. I would never have connected those dots if you hadn't said that. So yeah. So that is a little scary because you, on one hand, you have Christians who kind of protest, and whether they're hating or not, it can feel very hateful. Right? It could be that they're literally just protesting in their hearts and they're angry at sin or whatever. But when it comes across like that in signs and calling sinners or this, you know, the way they're protesting comes across very like.
And then when we started to talk, it kind of opened up. Because a lot of the girls are like, and then I would talk to them.
Yeah.
A lot of, and it was weird.
When you say the girls, you mean the girls in the club or the girls at pole jams?
The girls in the club.
In the club.
I was kind of, I wouldn't say alpha, but they're old. I was almost as old as the furniture, as they would say, because I'd been there so long.
Okay.
You know, and it was
Kind of the older sister or the,
yeah, and the house mom, whatever they wanted, you know, trying to get them to understand, you know, that good is good, you know, and these people are good.
Oh, so a lot of your influence actually in helping make the connection, I think receiving that love. What a special role you played.
It was different. Yeah. It was, I seen them as, because when you're inside, and I used to call it a dungeon, because you had basically, I mean, you were their puppet. You had to make money for your house. You had to pay them. You had to play nice. There were things like, you know, some of the girls you'd find out they were prostitutes. And you're like, how am I supposed to make money when Manny, Mo, and Jack over here is doing things they're not supposed to? And no, you know, and it made it hard, but at the same time, like, right, kind of before my accident, before there was a girl that I remember looking at her, and she was little, itty bitty thing, and she'd always looked up to me, and she looked at me and the bouncer that has been there forever. He walked me out, and we were talking, and then she looks at me and she says, "Why do they always have to touch?" And I said, "They do not, and they're not supposed to. That's on you, and you tell them not to. And if you don't like it, you tell him." And she was like, "But that's the only way I can make money." And I'm like, "No." And that's when the bouncer told her, "Did you not hear what she just said to you?"
Well, you played a really protective role.
And it's hard, because I didn't realize it until the accident, that when I went back, and it kind of freaked me out, because it was like they flocked me, but I was like, no, I'm not coming back, you know. I was like, I went back to get authorization that stated I worked there. And I'd been there 15 plus years. Do you know, to this day, they will not write that on a piece of paper.
That you were there.
That I worked so many, you know, this was my schedule and this is how much I got paid.
When you were talking about the other dancer that you were telling her how to not let the patrons touch her, you got really emphatic in a moment, like it was really like you felt something really strong.
Yeah, it was because when I first started dancing, back then they weren't allowed to. You were supposed to be a fantasy, okay? They were not supposed to touch you. And the years have gone, and they have made it to where it's basically you're almost pretty much selling yourself,
Selling yourself, right?
you know. And back then it was like you can almost live with, okay, that I was not, you know.
You were a fantasy. You were not.
Yeah.
You're kind of just in the head, so to speak. But
Yeah.
But now you're sensing. I think part of what you're feeling, you're saying, is that there's gone a new level now where you're become an object. They can touch. They can pawn you. You know.
Oh yeah.
It's kind of feel like a violation.
Very.
Yeah.
Very. They crossed those lines probably, I want to say maybe 10 years. 10 years. And to put up with it from what you used to have, that you didn't have to.
Right.
You know, and it was like, well, if you want to make money, you know, the girl over here is allowing this, you know. And so
It puts pressure on everyone to come to that. I want to talk to you a little bit, kind of fill in some gaps. I feel like you've been thinking things, or any thoughts you had about kind of what she was talking about in the story.
Well, my counselor came out, right, and
Yeah.
I'm thinking of trauma. And a lot of women get into the industry because of trauma, right? So especially sexual trauma early on. And I was thinking with this gal that you were, and I don't know who it is, but you were trying to really help her stand up for herself. And she's like, she's kind of wishy-washy about it, right? And I'm wondering if she had sexual abuse in her background, because when those boundaries get pushed as a child, you don't know that it's a boundary.
You don't realize it's been perforated, right? It's been crossed.
Right, whereas, you know, even when I was serving cocktails at the strip club, if somebody touched me, I would freeze. And there was, you know, sexual abuse in my history.
Right.
And so, you know, there's a fight, flight, or freeze response, right? And so I would usually freeze up. Sometimes, I mean, as I got older, I would get angry about it. But, you know, I was just sitting here thinking about...
Yeah, I saw you react. That's why your body language, your posture shifted. I was wondering what you were thinking.
Yeah.
But what would you say percentage-wise, just if you had to guess, that people in the industry come from, say, trauma or maybe specifically sexual trauma?
Well, the research shows between 66 to 90% of women who enter adult entertainment have
had
sexual...
Or having, it depends.
Or having sexual trauma.
Yeah.
That's huge. I actually have never heard that number before. 66 to 90% of people in the adult industry, or just dancers, or
in the adult entertainment industry, so prostitution, pornography, stripping,
66 to 90%. I want to say that's huge. Have had sexual abuse or sexual trauma.
Yeah.
It is.
And even like it's happened to me when I was young, but most of the girls you can tell, you can, because they some do exactly what she's saying. They'll freeze, some freak, and some fight. You know, and my thing was I fought.
Right. And you said no.
And no, or you got slapped.
Right.
You know, it was an instinct. It was one of those things that girls, you know, some ended up getting. I got trapped in a room with somebody once, and it was a first beginning. That should have been, hello, there's your clue, but it was, no, I'll just go over here, you know, because the money was good and you had no options, you know, and at that point in time, I think the options, because you find out that you either, you have a record, they have records, or they have no way out of a situation, fast money. There's so many different, from being, you could end up almost homeless to, you know, girls try and survive. Right. You know, and the ones that you find in the clubs usually are fighting for survival.
Yeah, when you're thinking about the numbers, hearing your story about being trapped in a room, and then you talk about 10 years ago, Oregon changed the law. I think it's Oregon, right, that allowed some touching, and you realize that those ladies, dancers who experienced trauma, who are now in industry are now being re-traumatized in a sense, legally, over and over and over again.
And you know, at first you think about it and you're like, oh, you know, you have to deal with what the cards are dealt.
Right.
And eventually you either wake up to it and you're like, why, what is going on? Why? And you put your foot down and you're like, no, you know? The sad part is that it leads to other things because it's easier access. It just depends on, you know? And that's the problem that being in the industry, I got to see a lot of it. And my expression to the young girls, I used to tell them when I said, it's okay to be a dancer, but don't live the lifestyle.
Gotcha.
And and a lot of them look at me and they're like, now I understand what you meant by that.
Yeah. Well, Joe now, like when we would go on outreach, we would talk, and her word for it is stripperitis.
Yeah.
Where we would just talk about it and say, wow, that girl she's got stripperitis. So all we could do is just love her. Just love her, you know. I think God really understands that. If I can understand and have compassion, I think God can have a lot more than me.
Yeah.
And I love hearing you talk, because you and I have talked a few times about what we're going to talk about, like the car accident and everything, but I've never heard this heart of yours come out before. Just the heart for the ladies who are dancing and kind of your passion for that. It's wonderful. So,
It's I think I was put in that situation because I always, like, one of my friends, like, before my husband lost his job, and this wasn't even in my forte. I was working at a place called Shopco. And
I love Shopko.
and I was doing I was a cashier. I was also getting ready to do the front end monitor and stuff, but I ended up having my son, and then I ended up not being able to do that because I had to leave because maternity and that. And then when I went back, this guy looks at me and goes, "Can you dance?" And I was like, "Well, yeah." I was like, "Are you talking like dance club, like, you know, disco, what?" And he goes, "No, like exotic dancing." And I'm like, he goes, "Have you ever heard of Stars Cabaret?" The only reason I remembered that place was because I thought of Ocean on the Sea or something, you know? I was like, mermaid, what? And I looked at him and I was like, what? He goes, exotic dancing. And I'm like, and he goes, stripping. And I'm like, oh, light bulb went off in my head. And I'm like, why would you even ask that question? And I went home and I told my husband, and I'm like, that's awkward. Who does that?
It's an awkward conversation to have at Shopco.
Yeah, and I was really shocked. And then one of my friends went, and she was a cocktail waitress it was called Scores, which was Cheetahs. And she's all, they're looking for dancers. And I'm like, I'm not, no. Brains over body, you know, and that's how I you know, and then when you get in a situation, you're like,
gotcha.
Because it was.
So early on, when it was presented to you, one in a very awkward way, and one from a friend, you were able to say no.
Yeah.
The crisis hit, and it was a door of opportunity to make some income. And it spent 15 years there, and you saw some changes, like in the Oregon law specifically.
Oh, yeah.
How you were treated, how you were objectified, you know, or at least the dancers were.
Oh, yeah, they definitely, to this day, they are treated like objects. They're from anywhere from management to the clients.
Interesting.
Even sometimes the other girls will do that too, and it's weird, but it's true. What they do is they're like, oh, well, I want to be her friend because she makes money. So I'm going to use her to be her friend so I can make that money with her.
Leverage that for income.
Uh-huh.
I want to take a quick hiatus on ask. So this has been really good for me to hear your story. when you reach out to the other clubs, are people generally as receptive, or is it a mix?
Yeah.
Do you find any hard time connecting with the dancers?
Oh, sure. I mean, there's people that are really skeptical, mostly in the beginning. I mean, we're in all the clubs now, and we have been for a while. So unless people are really new, the management and the owners know that we're safe. We're not in there, we're not going to be out there with our picketing signs. We're not going to be trying to get women to leave. We help support women who are dancing, whatever, it doesn't matter. We've made friends with a lot of these folks, and, we know their families, right? So in the beginning, of course, there were people that were afraid. I know that it was interesting times, and I believe wholeheartedly in God's timing, but there was a ration of picketers for a long time. And I remember when we started branching out into the clubs, there was a couple of clubs that were really, really skeptical because of the picketers. And I remember having this conversation, like, who are these stupid picketers? Like, what is their deal? And I don't remember the name of it now, but I looked them up online. They were from Portland, and they go around to all the strip clubs in Oregon. But there was one club in particular that the owner accepted us in and then kicked us out. He got really paranoid. I still don't know why. And the girls actually went to the manager of this club at the time, and the manager snuck us back in for a few months.
That's so great.
Because they're like, where's the pole gyms ladies? And so then he found out, and I guess he was like throwing things and breaking things. So we're like, no, we're going to stay away. But then he opened another club in town. And we used to, on outreach, go out of our way after outreach, and we would go pray in front of the club he opened. Every single month, we prayed for this owner and this club for months, weeks, years, I don't know, it was a long time. And that club actually, the manager, the same manager that let us into the other club, let us into this club. And we went in and we snuck into that club, and the next month it closed down.
Yeah.
And Joe was with us when that all happened.
Yeah. And then eventually he sold the other club.
Okay.
So
And we went, boom.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we're in, no problems.
Clubs, and specifically, what kind of ministry do you do? Because it sounds like if the woman accepts you, you're providing something of value, relationship, or what does pole gyms do for people who don't know?
So what we do is really, first and foremost, we just offer like a no strings attached connection. Yeah. So, we've
that
done.
has to be super important. Sorry, because you keep talking about the objectification of the females, and to have someone come in and say, "I love you and I like you," but not because of what you can do, just because you're made in God's image.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
And we'll tell people that. I mean, I've told people, you're made in God's image, you're important. I've had ladies try to give me money for the gifts. And they're like, and I said, no, this is all free. I've had people not take the gifts because they can't believe that nothing comes
Without the price tag.
Yeah.
Most people take the gifts though, but it happens where they don't. But we also, we've done everything. We've paid rent, we've paid electricity bills. Right now we have a COVID fund for women, and we're helping, we have a quick online grant application.
In case they can't dance, or they need
Yeah, well, the federal government
very thoughtful.
left out of people in adult entertainment, even though it's legal work.
Right.
They're not part of that
It's always a
stimulus check.
strange relationship, isn't it?
Uh-huh.
Government says you can do it, but we don't really see you.
Well, but how many of those people making these laws actually frequent strip clubs and prostitutes, right?
It's a strange relationship, isn't it?
Yeah, strange is a good word.
Yeah.
I have other words. They're not very nice.
Right.
So there's a lot of hypocrisy on that. But so we were able to help we still have our COVID relief fund. But we pay for counseling, specifically trauma counseling. We've got an equine therapist that helps, women. And so our counseling is indefinite. We don't just offer this many sessions.
Right.
It's like
That's so important.
It is.
Because the other model of so many sessions means that, we think we can fix you in 10 sessions, right?
Right.
Go 10 sessions, read a book for your trauma, and you'll be fine.
Right.
No, it's a long-term relationship, years.
Right. Right. We try not to put too many stipulations on money and what we can and can't do. to help people. But I mean, gosh, gift cards for groceries, it just depends. Christmas time and Thanksgiving, we try to,
If somebody meal trains.
yeah, meal trains.
Good. That's really important. So what was the most impactful gift that you received over these years of interacting with pole gyms?
Them coming in.
Just the relationship.
Yeah, because it was, you don't get, when you're used to seeing, okay, like myself, okay, it was one of those things that you're in a dungeon, okay, as I described the dungeon. It's a form of hell, basically, because you know there's right, there's, you try and live your life pretty much outside of that dungeon. I wouldn't call it self-righteous, but you try and do everything you're supposed to do right. Raise your kids, make dinner, all this. But you go in there and you're put in, I wouldn't say, I was very careful. I tried to pick my clientele. There was times I refused. But you're treated like you're dirt on somebody's shoe because they figure if they throw you $100, they could do that. So when somebody comes in and they actually express their feeling to let you know that you're not alone, and if you need help, and they're there to help. They're there to give you that connection, and the help isn't always money.
Right.
The help is there to be an ear. The help is there to just talk to you like you're a human being without being put in this box of whatever somebody wants to do. I mean, there's things that just,
It's powerful, but it sounded like
Yeah.
you really struggled with attention when you said, and I wanted to make sure I understood it when you were saying that there's this thing, like I know that there's right, and I want to be a good mom, and I want to have dinner at the table, and I want to do that. But then you seem like you're feeling attention, but I'm in the club, and I'm being objective.
Yeah,
I'm trying
you
to
get-
pick my clients. And
you get torn because you're walking on that middle line. And that nobody wants to be in the middle.
It's kind of being pulled. You kind of felt something.
Uh-huh.
So what ended up happening? I know I've heard this story, but I'd love for you to share it here. There's kind of because you were talking earlier that some folks, they eventually kind of see it, or they'll come along and go, oh, this is what's happening. The stripperitis for a while.
Yeah.
Right. But what was your story about how that ended for you?
When I stopped dancing, I was going to school to get my GED, so I could get the job that I have. And
what prompted that? I mean, let's go back. Like, how did that come about? That all of a sudden you go, oh, I should get my GED so I can get
the job that I knew it was coming up because I knew somebody was, and when you know somebody's going to get fired, and where I work, it's kind of like, oh, okay, so I was like, well, okay, and so I decided that I was going to go. So I'm like, okay, well, so I go and I'm going home, and I wasn't at work, and I wasn't at my other job. I was coming home from school, and it was 8 o'clock at night, and it was slightly raining, just slightly, and I noticed a semi behind me as I pull off the freeway. And I just got my car. My car was only 1.5 years old, and it was a Honda Civic, and so I thought, oh, okay, I turn green, go. And as you go up on Mission, from turning like you're going to Shopko area, okay, the Home Depot area, there's a light. Okay, so you have to go up that little hill and then go down. Well, I go down and the light turns red. Okay, so I stop. And that's what you're supposed to do. Well, I hear the screeching of the brakes. And I'm like, the car next to me stopped. They're stopped. And I look in my rear view mirror and I can see the grill coming at me. And I thought, here I go. God take me now. That was the only thing that there's nothing you can do. And I grabbed my steering wheel and I went like this and I felt tighter. And the crunch, the sound of an aluminum can, and then you open your eyes because you don't feel anything. And you're like, am I alive? You move your fingers, your toes, and then you think, oh shit, my gas tank. So I get out of my car, and this lady's standing there, and she's screaming at me, and I'm like, she's like, are you okay? Are you okay? And I'm like, where the hell's my purse, and where's my phone, and what's going on? Okay. Being short saved me, but that's not the only thing that saved me. There was this, you could fit a cigarette pack, not the length of the cigarette pack this way, the width. My Bible was sitting in the back seat of my car. I had Bible book. I was doing a book, well, not a book, but Bible study, that's what I'm looking for, with some friends. And none of that was touched. My purse, everything got stung. When I stepped out of my car, there was not even a stitch of glass on me. But glass was all broken around me. And my thing about that is I knew that day that I shouldn't have been alive. Because the only thing that saved me was God. Because,
You couldn't fit in that space.
Yeah. Nobody else that would have been in that seat would have survived. And so I got up, and the lady takes me to her Jeep, and I'm like shaking, and I'm like, can I smoke a cigarette? Because I really need one, like right now. And so she's all, yeah. And then the cops and the fire truck, the guy, actually I seen the guy, and he looked like he was he was tears, and he just he couldn't understand, and it blew his mind. I was blown, she was blown, and I'm just sitting there and I'm like, okay. And then I told my son, I'm like, you need to get my dance bag out. There's stuff in there that I need to have because, like my robe, I liked my robe. The only way you could get out was the jaws of life. And that wasn't going to happen. And they also asked, my husband goes, well, you go back to dancing if we get it out. And I said, I don't think so. And he looks at me and I'm like, that would be like slapping God in the face. Because he saved me. That stuff stuck. There's nothing I can do. They're not going to take the jaws of life for my stuff. It's stuff. And so I went down that path with the girls a little bit longer. And
what do you mean, the girls?
we were doing a Bible study thing. And it was kind of whatever. It didn't work out very well. And so I called Cynthia up because we had ran into each other prior
To the
accident, and this is the weird part, okay? Because she came up to me when I was with those girls, and we were having this meeting or whatever, and she goes, "You're the one," and I was like, "Yeah," and she's like, "I didn't know that. Oh my God, are you okay?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, I'm here." And I said, I'm still recovering a little bit, And, but I ended up getting the job that I was setting out to get. I now have been at Salem Ecclesia for almost 2.5 years,
Yeah.
3 years. But when I ran into her, it was really weird because she sat there and she goes, "You're the one that knows that's how we connected, how we knew. I don't know if we're supposed to say.
Oh, just the gal that was doing the Bible study?
No.
No.
Well, yeah, that one. But we also connected through the other girl that does pole gyms with us.
Oh, the other girl. Oh, yeah, the other volunteer.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kara.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my friend from way back in the 2000s.
And we found out that is actually how.
Right, so Kara, okay, this will fill in the
Here's
story.
connection, yes.
So Kara volunteers at pole gyms, and our longtime family friends, her and her husband. So Kara said that there was a lady who was in an accident, who was a stripper, and I didn't know who it was. She didn't tell me the name, and so she was lucky to be out of the industry. Blah blah blah. Kind of told me the story, and because I think they gave. Didn't they offer you a job or give you a raise or something?
Yeah, they gave me a raise while I was out.
They wanted her not to have to feel like she needed to go back.
Right.
Yeah.
And I remember I was like, oh, that's wonderful, Kara. I'm so glad. Well, then I saw her, with this mutual friends, and I was like, and she was talking about the accident, and then my conversations with Kara connected the dots.
Oh, right.
And I was like, but Kara and her husband are just amazing, generous people with their finances. And so I was just like, wow. And like, it hit me. I remember it really hit me hard because this is where the tapestry of God woven together, I got to see a little bit of that.
So good.
And how our relationship with Kara and her husband over the years, I mean, just how God brings us together.
Yeah.
But a month before her accident, we were on outreach, and Joe and I were talking, and she said she wanted to get out and go to bartending school.
Yeah.
And she was trying to get the money to do that. And so I had gone back to Pole Gym's leadership, and we were figuring out ways, because we didn't have the budget we do now, but we were trying to figure out ways to pay for her to go to bartending school. And if I recall correctly, we had figured out like a budget, and so I went eagerly next month to outreach because I didn't know her name, I didn't know her phone number, any of that, and I never saw her again. But I was going to ask her, like, how much is bartending school, because we're going to make this happen for you.
Right.
And she'd been in the accident, but I didn't know
You
that.
didn't know that. So then you met the accident. Then you got a pay raise, and you're still with the company today.
Yeah.
And so if I get the story a little right, I want to make sure I get it.
But I only work for them half time now.
Oh, okay.
Doug gave me an excellent, he knew the person was going to be fired. And it was either he lost me or he lost my husband. And my husband has a little more, he's Doug's supervisor at the school that I was working at, so he was kind of like my boss too. But Doug goes, their Cascades opening, up this. And so if you apply, then I will give you awesome recommendations, but you need to apply for it. And I was like, okay, so I did. And I work part-time for him, and I also work at the school. So as the budget goes, I make more doing those two than I did dancing.
Wow, that's wonderful. I love hearing that.
And the one thing I want to say, that it sounds very odd, but I had somebody pray for, I had a lot of people pray for me to get out of the industry. I had a person actually tell me that they did it in a bad, and not a good way. And when you have everything ripped out from underneath you, and you feel like because I was stuck.
Right.
I call it stuck in limbo. And I kept praying and praying and praying and praying and praying. And he answered my prayers by giving me everything that I wanted, but better.
But better, yeah. And interesting, so I was listening to you earlier, and what I gathered is, at some point you decided to get your GED and you were still dancing.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to go to school for that, and you were going to study to be a bartender?
No, I was going to get the job that I
You currently have, okay.
Yeah.
So you were studying that. And then you had been looking at maybe helping her with bartending, so you kind of a couple things. But in that moment that you were kind of really making the movement, you got this accident. And in that accident, you lost all your dance gear. And that was the moment that you felt God said, "No, I'll take care of you.
Yeah.
You're done."
I thought I was done when that car, when the truck hit me.
The truck hit you.
And I've never doubted there was a God. That I can remember. I know, my thing is that was I good enough for him? Because you don't, in the industry, you never feel that you're worthy. Because people put you in the situations and so you don't feel very clean. And so you try and keep, your morals, your, and it's very hard because, and that's why I want to say a lot of the girls, they lose it. And it's not their fault. They don't know. Even being smart and even being college educated,
right.
I mean, I've seen some, and I'm like, why? Because circumstances, because things happen, and they lose their identity.
So if you were, someone were to ask you today, someone in the adult industry were to say to you, am I worthy of God's love?
Yes.
Yes.
Without a doubt, yes. Because one of the girls said something to me, and it never really clicked until, because I was like, I go to church, and she was like, one of my friends had passed away, and I had ran into her, but one day I sat there, and I always carried this gold cross that somebody gave me, and it was solid gold, and I seen she was having really, really bad, she was having rough, and something told me to walk up to her and give it to her. So I did. I'm like, you need this more than I do. And she looked at me and I'm like, no, seriously. I was just to let you know I was told to do that. I don't know why, but here you go. And she was shocked, but she wasn't appalled. She was just like, okay, and but she told me something. She goes, even Mary Magdalene was with Jesus. And I thought about that, and I was like, and then I got to learn about that, because I never really learned about that, because I wasn't in church long enough to actually learn about that.
Right.
And it was like, wow.
Yeah. And even Mary Magdalene, what do you, for those folks who might be watching that don't know about Mary Magdalene?
She was a prostitute, correct? And she was also, she traveled with God.
She did travel with God, yeah, traveled with Jesus, yeah.
And
watched the Savior's feet.
yeah, and she was there.
Incredible stories in the New Testament, actually.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
And so, are people worthy? Oh yeah.
Not just worthy, but welcome.
Yes.
Welcome. And that's what you incarnate and pulled in. So.
Yeah, well, that's our POLE, stands for Purposed, Original, Loved, Empowered. So that's the identity that we believe everybody has in Christ. And then GEMS is taken from Proverbs.
Right.
She is more precious than rubies.
She is, that's good.
Yeah, so that's the identity that we believe, men and women, all at the clubs encompass, and we treat them like that. And that's the thing, you treat somebody with dignity and worth the way that you believe God wants people treated. And it's amazing how welcomed you are. It's not rocket science.
It's not rocket science. But you know what, Slow, what you just said? You said the woman and the men.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of people will take the stance, the gross, creepy men that are there taunting at the females, right? And you tend to, they kind of reverse objectification, right?
Right.
We hate them, they're jerks. And you said, no, even the men, made in the image of God, deserve to be encountered with a level of respect and dignity.
Yep, absolutely. The men that work at the clubs, the men that the patrons of the clubs, all of it. Like no sex is better than the other, and we all fall short of the glory. I mean, right? Like all of our hearts are wicked and deceptive, all of us. So, no, we're all on, the ground is level at the foot of the cross, I guess, is the stance that is taken at pole gyms. And while there's some people that, can rub us wrong here and there at the clubs, it's bound to happen.
Right.
We always end up praying for them.
Yeah.
And we always end up just edifying them to God, because that's what we're supposed to be doing. And that's,
It's good.
yeah, it's very simple.
It is simple, but some of those simple things are the hardest things to
Sometimes, yes.
to become. Like,
Yeah.
They just love people.
But that's
have to.
I want to say that's where, when you're in a group setting, it makes it that's we go into the clubs as a group, and we wait and we come out as a group. And so if something were to, and so, we talk amongst ourselves and say, hey, da 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 da, did you, and then we'll pray for that. Instead of just putting it on that one person.
Right.
It's
a group doing it.
Yes.
Yeah, gotcha.
Because it makes it easier to see, and there's other ways of going around. Well, did you? And they're like, well, maybe, let me open your eyes to this, and so
It's
you
almost
learn.
like you have like a little beautiful church community
We do.
within
Yeah.
the church. Like
We do.
Yeah. I picked it up on the other interview we had too with the pole gyms board members. That was wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, so the website is polegems.org.
Yes.
We'll put that in the bio information, and with your information down there. And if people want to contribute to help the ministry, they can go to the website
Yes.
and can donate there.
That'd be awesome. Thank you. Yeah, we don't have any paid staff, so.
It's all
No.
volunteer,
Yes.
and you have budgets for things like helping people through tough times, paying rent, paying utilities, coronavirus budget, those kinds of things.
Yep.
Love that. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for the time today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of
Amazing
course.
you guys.
Of course.
It's awesome.
It
Yeah,
is.
thanks for sharing your
It's
testimony.
it's
I've never heard kind of the full version of it. I've heard just that little snippet of it.
it's I want to say an opportunity that people rarely get to experience. And so when you get to share it, it makes it a little more realistic for people.
Comes home.
Yes.
Comes home.
And it was, I thought, for me at least, in my experience with you, the most incredible moment was when you went back to your home club
Yes.
on outreach.
Oh,
So she didn't go for, she was with pole gyms, but she didn't go on outreach for like a year.
right.
And she just healed. She just
Right.
had a season of healing and being loved on and prayed over and prayed with us. And so she went back to her home club, and the bouncer, he's just the sweetest guy ever. He was like, "Oh, are you coming back to dance?" And she's like, no. And he's like, "Oh, you're with them." Like, it was like this realization, right?
Yeah.
But you were welcome either way, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was like, awesome. So yeah, it was like, he was really like confused.
Yeah.
A lot of the people were confused that knew me. They were like, "Are you?" And I'm like, "No, here's your gift."
So good. So good. I want to ask you a question. I got to ask Cynthia and the board members too. I just want to ask you, if you were to speak to the church today, the Evangelical Church in America, about strippers and about the club and about the lifestyle and about the people in the industry, what would you say to the church about it?
Be very open-minded, because the book's cover is always dirtier than the soul. Because your soul has been, I want to say, you can have the dirtiest cover and try and keep your soul pure, but people judge you on what they see on the outside, let alone on the inside.
Wow.
And that's the thing about Joe that I always loved so much, is that, a lot of women, and I don't fault them for this at all, they have to do drugs, get stoned, drink, whatever, to go on stage. They have to numb out. She didn't do that. And she stayed kind and compassionate through all these years in the industry, sober.
And how did that come about? How did you do that? You know,
It was hard.
not like
Very,
it's like a 3-step plan, but I'm curious, constitution-wise, like what?
it was very hard. My mom was an alcoholic. I lost 2 of my brothers because of drugs. So that wasn't in my forte because I knew people would die. Not me, but you know, I've watched how that happens, and I was like, you lose everything. My son, I love my son dearly. He does drugs. He was doing drugs. He's in prison now. Because of his mistakes, his choices. But I asked him one time, well, actually I told him, I didn't ask him. I said, have you ever heard of $1 million drug addict? And he looked at me and I'm like, where's the fame? Where's all the stuff that you want? It never happens. Why? Because you're too busy trying to get the next high. I said, and it sucks. Because you don't only just take what you want, but you take your parents, you take your kids, you take your wife, and it goes. And so that's something that kept me straight.
Kept you sober.
I back when in the early 80s, they had AA and NA, and my mom used to take me. So I got to hear the horror stories. I was the quiet kid in the corner.
Well, that's not a bad experience, actually, as a kid, to see that.
Yeah, and as my mom was trying to get sober, as she finally did when I was in 6th grade, but I lost my brother, so it was very hard. The problem with it is that you're watching your mom get sober and you watched your brother die of cocaine, alcohol, and morphine.
That's tough.
And he was 28 years old. So you kind of look at life and you're like, okay, I'm not doing that. I'm a baby of 7. So, and the youngest beside me is 13 years older.
Oh.
And he's gay.
This is quite a range.
Yeah, he's gay, which, I mean, you know, I'm not judging. He's my brother, I love him. I lost another one just a 1.5 years ago due to his drug use way back when he got hepatitis and cancer, and it, you know, he died from the cancer. It just, you learn. If you want to, I want to say survive, you know, you learn. You try not to carry on the family tradition, you know? So that's how I stayed sober through.
These life experiences kind of tough.
I mean, I dabbled, but I want to say dabbled.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't something that I would go hurt or, you know, take from or go steal for, or, you know, it was like, okay, well, this is starting to be a problem. Okay, I'm done.
Yeah.
You know, and that was that. Because I noticed, because I seen the signs, because I was there. So I want to say their experience saved my life.
That's good.